Welcome to the SCPI Football Championship Podcast. Connor Morissette, Keith Mulder here with you as always. Keith, it's our final football podcast, so we'll look back on the year, talk about the championship games, and then go through our team of the season, the All-SCPI All-City team. A lot of alls in there. We're still working on the name. We have some individual players that we'd like to highlight. But what a season. This has been a terrific season. I remember all the way back in August we were here talking about teams. We did a story from Manual Arts, or a podcast from Manual Arts High School. We've been all over the place.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and so have a lot of these teams. I mean, who would have thought that San Fernando would have come out with the D1 victory? I mean, a lot of the preseason predictions we had obviously came a little bit short. It was certainly an exciting year. A lot of players coming out of the woodworks, and Narbonne, the ultimate champion.
Yeah, Narbonne, they have a ton of players on our All-City team, and deservedly so. They're the best of the bunch. But let's start with the championship. So we'll go from D3 to the Open, even though the Open was first. In Division 3, Keith, we both took that one in from El Camino College. That was Marshall, who won 61-26 over Verdugo Hills. Just a dominating performance by the Barristers. The only time they looked not that good was their first drive of the game, where I believe they won 3-0, and then from there it was points. Daniel Soto, 10-13 for 154 yards, but 5 touchdown passes. Great performance from him. Johnny Hernandez caught 4 of those touchdown passes. And then on defense, Gary Chu, he was everywhere, recovered a fumble and took it to the house for Marshall. So a complete performance. Not the Eagle Rock team, the Santee team that we thought we were going to get out of D3, but Marshall. You play against who you play against, and this time it was Verdugo Hills, and they rolled.
Yeah, and Verdugo Hills, we knew them as just an offensive team primarily, that they're going to beat you with their offense. But in that game, they just weren't rolling as much. And we saw that Soto-Hernandez connection early and often, especially near the goal line, the ability for Hernandez to kind of roll out on that wheel route outside, and then Soto just give it just a little pass, and he got multiple touchdowns off of that. That Marshall team, they won it on both sides of the ball. As you said, fumble recoveries for touchdowns. I think there was a kick return for a touchdown as well. They did it all, and they really deserved to win that championship. Running clock in the fourth quarter, so nice job to the Barristers.
I love Verdugo Hills' approach, though. They said, we're going to throw the ball all over the yard, and for a little bit in the first quarter it was working, and then Marshall kind of changed some stuff defensively, and so obviously the adjustments worked. But Verdugo Hills, they said, we threw the ball a lot. That's how we got here. We're going to stick to our guns, and they threw it a ton. Worked at first, and then Marshall, I think just the better team, made the adjustments, and it worked out. But credit to them for sticking to their guns. In Division 2, this was one of the games of the weekend, probably number 2 for me. The best game I thought was the D1 game, which we'll get to. Huntington Park in D2 wins over Cleveland 18-14. And this game was back and forth. Huntington Park was up, Cleveland was up, and then Huntington Park had the final say. So a very exciting game after 2 running clock games, the Open and then the D3 game.
Right, yeah, that D3 game was a long one for sure out of El Camino. A lot of penalties, really long first half, and then we saw Huntington Park and Cleveland. It seemed like that half, or the first quarter, ended in maybe 20 minutes. It was a really quick first quarter. Really good defenses that I saw. Watching from the sidelines, really big hits. Both of those defensive lines are really strong, and it was really low scoring in the first quarter, first half really. The entire game, and Huntington Park coming out with the victory. The running game, I think, ultimately too much for Cleveland to handle.
Yeah, and Bejan Lee was a big part of that. But Cleveland, they fought back from 2 scores. It was 12-0 on 14-12, and then eventually Huntington Park won 18-14. But Bejan Lee and Victor Molina were great. Victor Molina, the quarterback for Huntington Park. Bejan Lee, probably, this might be a bit of a hot take, but one of the better running backs outside of Division I for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think actually that's that hot of a take at all. He is fantastic. And Huntington Park, I feel like both of us have doubted that team at times, so we owe you an apology. One of the players came up to me after and said, hey, I watch your stuff. You're always doubting us. You thought we might have lost to Roosevelt, and then you didn't pick us today. And, so, they proved us wrong, and now they're playing in a state bowl game. So Congratulations to them. Sorry for doubting you, Huntington Park. Great season.
Yeah, absolutely. And we knew that their offense was loaded, certainly. But we were just wondering, are they going to be able to compete with the defenses that, were in that D2 bracket? In Cleveland, they were coming in hot. They beat Eagle Rock in overtime. But I guess in that close games, they can go either way. And clearly Huntington Park pulled it out in the end.
I do want to say I thought Cleveland got a bit of a bad break with a penalty. It was a personal foul penalty after they had appeared to have stopped Huntington Park, so it looked like they were going to get off the field, and then a 15-yard penalty was called, and Huntington Park, of course, went on to score on that drive. So just something I noticed. Don't want to make too big of a deal out of it, but Cleveland, I saw that. All right, Division One, San Fernando 28, Dorsey 21. That was the game of the championships. That was the top one. San Fernando, actually, Dorsey started out really strong. They got the ball first, drove the ball all the way down, scored, and it looked like it might be a long day for San Fernando. But from there, SF scored 28 unanswered points.
Wow.
And then Dorsey made a bit of a push at the end, but it wasn't enough. 28-21. That was one of the games where at the end you kind of had jitters in your stomach a little bit, and that was the first time really all season that I had him to that extent. That was a crazy ending, so exciting, and I want to shout out a couple players in a second, but just a great game.
Yeah, absolutely. And San Fernando, I mean, we doubted San Fernando coming in because we knew Dorsey was
who
so
was
hot.
we? I picked San Fernando.
Okay, excuse me. My apologies. I mean, we both picked San Fernando in the bracket, but,
but hey, I picked them on here, too.
No,
but
that's true,
you're right. I
true.
did say I wish I could pick Dorsey, but hey, I stuck with my guns and picked San Fernando.
That is true.
Which you can't say, Keith.
I know, I cannot. The Dorsey Dons influenced me a little bit in that pick. But because they were so hot, their momentum was clearly on their side. All the D1 talent that they had, Juwan Collins, that whole, the four horsemen, the whole rushing attack. But clearly, the running attack for San Fernando, we talked about it all season long. It's been there. Trevor Gill, that whole rushing attack for San Fernando clearly showed up in that game.
Yeah, and so here are some of my thoughts. I was very impressed with San Fernando's hurry-up offense. I thought they were very well coached, and that was something that they've been doing all year, and you could tell they had it down to a T. It was perfect. A couple false starts here and there, so maybe not perfect, but it was just a very well-executed system. Trevor Gill was great, and Andrew Frias, their quarterback, who missed the end of the game, but he threw for a touchdown pass, which I'm sure the Dorsey Dons weren't expecting. He was great. San Fernando, they know their personnel. They're going to rely on the run, but they trust their quarterback, and that showed in the championship game. Like I said earlier, Dorsey marched down the field, scored on the first possession, but then didn't score again until the fourth. Another thing, the San Fernando crowd was the best crowd of the weekend, so that was nice to see. And then the last thing, Dorsey on paper is the more talented team, so I have to give credit to San Fernando for pulling out a victory. And I'm sure you saw this on Twitter. They were just talking about how we don't have any players with any offers at all,
right?
And we beat a team who has a good amount of players with offers. And that just goes to show you, sometimes in high school football, it's not all about the talent. Coaching plays a big role, the motivation, the scheme, all that good stuff. It's not just talent. And so congrats to San Fernando. They played a hell of a game, and they had a great season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, perfect season from start to finish, really. They came in the only number one seed to actually make it to the championship, and then, or rather than Narbonne, but from the lesser of the divisions to go and win the rest of their bracket, be the number one seed, and then ultimately win the championship. So shout out to you guys. Great year.
And then finally, the Open Division, and what can you say about this one? Narbonne 48, Crenshaw 7. Jalen Chapman's quarterback rating was 140. He threw for 3 touchdowns, no picks. Jamar Jefferson was over 200 yards rushing. Steve Jenkins was over 200 yards receiving. It was video game stuff from Narbonne in this game. Running clock, demolition. We both thought it was going to be closer. Everyone on Twitter was like, oh, well, you picked Narbonne, but you said it was going to be a tough test. I thought it was going to be a tough test, but it was not. Crenshaw, clearly the number 2 team in the city, and Narbonne way better than they are. So just an incredible performance from them, and I guess we should get used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Narbonne, they're perennial powers in the LA City section, and I think that everybody expected them to win, and I think that coming in, I mean, they were the team to beat. But I think that Crenshaw, I had a little bit more faith in their defense. Their defensive line, very stacked. They have a lot of really good guys on that line. But we just saw the scheme for Narbonne, and we saw Jamar Jefferson. Almost every single carry was 15 yards from him, and then his ability to take one to the house, unreal. They beat Crenshaw every which way, and picks, great defensive plays. Logan Taylor with some good returns. Everything was working for them that night.
Congrats to Narbonne. Big win over Crenshaw to win the Open Division. Okay, it's time for the exciting reveal, the all-SCPI Football City team. So we broke this down into 4 distinct groups. We have the offensive skill position group, the defensive group, the lineman group, so it doesn't matter if you're on the O-line or the D-line, and then the special teams group. And Keith, these were some tough selections for us, especially at the linebacker spot. I had a really tough time choosing 4 linebackers, or we, I should say, but
right.
Especially me when I was submitting my selections, had a tough time with the linebackers. And I thought the secondary was kind of hard too. And, of course, running back. So, every selection was really difficult, but, that's enough of me talking. Let's get to these big reveals. So, for the skill position, let's get started. I'll list them, and then we'll give some thoughts, and then we'll go on to the next group. So
Right.
the offensive skill positions, quarterback of the year goes to Jalen Chapman of Narbonne. 2 running backs, Jamar Jefferson of Narbonne and Trevor Gill of San Fernando. Gill is a junior, very tough for a junior to make this list, so congrats to him. 4 wide receivers, Rayshawn Williams from Crenshaw, Romeo Dobbs from Jefferson, Bryson Tremaine from Venice, and Dondell Finley from Southgate. And then at the tight end spot, Isaiah Smalls from Dorsey. Imagine that team on paper. That would be a
Wow.
ridiculous team. Southern section would be very competitive. It would be very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at all these guys, Jamar Jefferson from Narbonne, he was really their spark plug all year long. Always such a consistent runner, very physical despite, being a little bit undersized for a running back. I think that entire Narbonne team, their whole offense is fantastic. Jalen Chapman, we saw him early on. He had some accuracy concerns, but when it mattered, he was able to complete passes.
You love the accuracy concerns with him.
What can I say? I mean, I'm a man for the completion percentage. What can I say? But
he looked great in that Open Division Championship.
he did.
That's for
He
sure.
really did, and especially in that semifinal against Fairfax, his ability to hit passes deep down the
71 zip.
field, it was crazy. And I think that when he needed to, he turned it on, and especially with his running ability. And Rutgers, they're getting a great recruit. Another guy I want to give a shout out to on that list, Dondell Finley, and Lucas as well was considered the other Southgate receiver, but Finley this year, amazing statistics. I mean, looking at this, he had a 23 or 25-yard touchdown, but receiving the ball, he had 43 catches for 1,001 receiving yards, 14 receiving touchdowns. So every single catch he got, 23.3 yards, and then he had 14 touchdowns, tops in the section. Great performance from him. Also, Ernie Garcia, got to give him a shout out. He was in the running for quarterback of the year. That whole Southgate team, they really surprised some people.
Yeah, and so a couple takeaways for me. Just the receivers. I've been to a bunch of football games this year. Rayshawn Williams' game against Crenshaw, or if he's on
Carson.
Crenshaw, against Carson
Right.
was one of the most dominating performances I've ever seen. Romeo Dobbs against Arleta in the first round of the playoffs was one of the most dominating performances I've seen from a receiver. And then Bryson Tremaine against El Camino Real was one of the most dominating performances I've seen from a receiver this year. And then Trevor Gill, shout out to him for just being so consistent. So that's the offensive skill position group. Now let's move on to the lineman group. So some defensive guys, some offensive guys here, but I'll list it off. Sir Riley from Palisades, Jonah Tuananu from Narbonne, probably the best offensive lineman, maybe even in the history of the section. He was ridiculous. Timothy Mosley from Dorsey, Amir Crowder from Crenshaw, Baraka Beckett from Palisades, Ari Salas from Palisades, and then Alonzo Gray Hall from Reseda, who led the section in sacks. Those are some big boys who deserve this honor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just talking about Alonzo Gray Hall from that team up north, they didn't make it as far as maybe people expected him to, but he was a big reason as to why they were so dominant defensively. 22 sacks on the year, I think 16 tackles for loss. Unreal statistics from him, and the ability for him to get to the quarterback so much that year. It's a crazy year from him. Some other guys, obviously that Palisades D-line, O-line, one of the best in the section for sure. And there's so much talent on that line for Palisades, but also Narbonne. You could really say any guy on Narbonne could be in this lineman
Juice
group.
Tapua kind of got a raw deal from us, so sorry, Juice. You had a great year as well, but we can only give it to so many guys. The Palisades group, like you mentioned, those three of Salas, Beckett, and Riley, great crew, and Dorsey getting some love with Timothy Mosley. It's a great line.
Mm-hmm.
On defense now, get ready, Narbonne. It's a lot of Narbonne. Linebacker, Ray Scott, Narbonne. Linebacker, Darian Butler, Narbonne. Linebacker, Julian Lewis, Narbonne. Linebacker, Daryl Carrington, Fairfax. Defensive back, Dion Bascom, Dorsey. Defensive back, DeMonte Peoples, Narbonne. Defensive back, Nayland Fuimano, Carson. And defensive back, Logan Taylor, also from Narbonne. What can you say about Narbonne? What a
Oh, my goodness.
dominating defense.
I mean, Raymond Scott, we're here at USC. Raymond Scott coming to SC. Great performer. He's kind of like a Suak Cravens, to talk about a former Trojan. Suak Cravens type in that he's a hard hitter, but he's also extremely quick. He's a great defender for talking about pass protection, that sort of thing. And we saw him return a punt for a touchdown in that semifinal against Fairfax. That whole Narbonne secondary is just loaded. But Dion Bascom's a guy I want to shout out because his ability this year to not only intercept passes but also take him to the house is something that I don't think we've seen or will see in coming years. His ability, punt return touchdowns, everything. He's just so quick. He's a little bit undersized, but I think his speed really speaks for itself. And it's a great crew right there, and that linebacking core from Fairfax also got to give them a shout out too.
Yeah, and there's one player who just missed the cut for the secondary who we're going to recognize in a little bit, so I want to touch on that in a bit. But you're right, the linebacking core, shout out to Julian Lewis, who doesn't get the hype that the other Narbonne players might get, but he's been fantastic this season. Had a great Open Division championship game. I remember we left him off our watch list at the beginning of the year, and that was a mistake. He's a fantastic player, so I wanted to give him some credit for his great season, and he makes our All-City team. DeMonte Peoples, another guy who's kind of under the radar at Narbonne, great player. You mentioned Dion Bascom. Logan Taylor, finally, is the one other guy who I want to discuss. He is just the heart and soul of that Narbonne team.
Yeah.
He is the last man back, the free safety guy, leads the section in interceptions. He's the holder for Narbonne. He catches passes sometimes. He returns kicks, punts. Talk about a guy who can do it all. And I saw he had a in-home visit with UC Davis. Wherever this guy ends up, that school is lucky to have him. He's a hard hitter. He's a big gamer. He's a competitor. And I'm glad he's on this list because he really deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, Defensive Player of the Year, if you ask me, because his ability not only to just, defend the pass and to get those interceptions, but also to be a big hitter, because a lot of safeties, they just want to be ball hawks. They just want to be ball hawks. They just want to get the picks. But he's a guy that you got to watch out for him in run coverage, because he'll be a guy that'll sneak up on you and get some big hits. And also can't forget about his offensive ability. He had a 2-point conversion in that game against Fairfax. And he's a guy that, you can plug and play almost like an Adoree Jackson. He's just so quick, but also very powerful.
Yeah, great player there. All right, to the last group, the special teams unit. Kicker Campbell Geddes from Palisades. That brings Palisades total to 4, so congrats to the Dolphins. The punter, Matthew Tercios from Granada. And then the kick returner, Jelani Ellison from Reseda. He could have been on the secondary list. He just missed out there. But he's going to get some love as a kick returner. I saw him return many a kick for a touchdown this year. And then the punt returner, Anthony Beeler from Fairfax. Good group of special teams players highlighted by Jelani Ellison.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellison, and can't forget, a guy, honorable mention, E.J. Gable.
Yes.
Fantastic returner there. And a lot of really good returners in the city section. Beeler, one of the most consistent punt returners we saw him against Fairfax. Basically the only bright spot in that game against Narbonne in the semifinal. But through and through, Ellison, he's a gamer, as you said, just like Logan Taylor, but he's so elusive. His speed and his ability to just hit that gap and just go, great.
Yeah, and dynamic too. He can play receiver, return kicks, also big in the secondary, and he was number 2 in the city section in interceptions. He had 7. I think last year he had 15.
Yeah.
So if you have 15 picks, that'll get you up to one of our top 4 secondary spots. But when it was this close, I thought we want to recognize some other players there, and we'll still give you the shout out in the special teams all-city team. So that's really the rationale there with Jelani Ellison. But Keith, just final thoughts on this season. Congrats to Narbonne, who's still playing Huntington Park, and who's the other team that's still playing?
San
Crenshaw.
Fernando.
No, Crenshaw. San Fernando is not
right.
playing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the two teams who advanced to the city section championship. So Crenshaw, Narbonne, and then Huntington Park from D2. So congrats to them who are still playing. But great season.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun throughout to watch. Every single week, we gotta thank the fans, of course. You guys are really what make doing this podcast fun. To see your reactions, keep them coming. Obviously, basketball season is coming up, so
so we'll start doing that very soon.
Yeah, very soon. And it was a great season to watch. Everybody try and take down Narbonne, and ultimately to see the excellence that is Narbonne. They're kind of like the Golden State Warriors, and that everybody's trying to knock them down. But they just have too much talent. And also, I just loved shouting out the little teams, the little guys. The Torreses and the Santees. These teams that maybe don't get as much coverage, but we certainly think about you guys. We always watch the box scores. Certainly exciting playoffs, and to see San Fernando get that huge win. It was a great game versus Dorsey, one of the best of the weekend, really. We wish that the Open Division could have been a little bit tighter, but just goes to show you that greatness lies in Narbonne and that Harbor City.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you in basketball season. For Keith DeMolder, I'm Connor Morissette. That's a great football season. Thanks for tuning in.